He wasn't supposed to survive the storm. A man in a faded marine coat, frost clinging to his beard, sat alone on a frozen bench at the edge of Red Valley. No name, no home, just the quiet stare of someone who had seen too much and said too little. The locals called the police. The police sent a K9 unit. But when the German Shepherd reached him, it stopped, ears down, tail low. Then came the sound no one expected, a soft whimper, followed by the dog pressing its head into the soldier's chest. Time froze. The snow seemed to hold its breath. Because this wasn't just any man, and that wasn't just any dog. It was a reunion that defied war, distance, and death itself. A miracle only faith could explain. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe that loyalty never dies, hit subscribe. Snow fell in slow, whispering veils over Red Valley, softening the cracked roads and muffling every sound until the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Beneath a flickering street lamp sat a man who didn't belong. Not to the town, not to the season, maybe not even to himself. Ethan Walker, 38, once a Marine captain, now a shadow of one. His face was wind-burned, lined by hours of sand and gunfire, a faint scar slicing through his left brow. A thick stubble covered his jaw, the color of rust against skin pale from cold. His broad shoulders were wrapped in a faded olive coat, the kind issued long before the wars he fought, and his boots, cracked, salt-stained, looked like they had marched too many miles with too little purpose. Ethan's eyes, a deep gray blue, carried that hollow focus of men who'd seen too much and felt too little for too long. He sat motionless at the old bus shelter, his breath forming ghosts in the air, staring at something beyond the falling snow. To anyone passing by, he was another drifter. But Red Valley, a town too small to keep its secrets, did not take kindly to ghosts. From the window of Martha's Diner, an old woman with wiry gray hair and a cigarette dangling from her lips watched the stranger for nearly an hour before picking up the phone. Her name was Martha Green, owner of the diner since before the factory closed, and she trusted her instincts more than she trusted men. "He's been sitting there since dawn," she told the sheriff's line, her voice brittle as ice. "Doesn't blink, doesn't move. I don't like it." By the time the first patrol arrived, the snow had thickened, painting the world in white silence. The patrol car's headlights carved two golden paths through the haze, stopping a few yards from Ethan. From the driver's side stepped Officer Maya Collins, the youngest member of the county K9 unit. She was 31, tall and wiry, with dark auburn hair pulled into a tight braid beneath her wool cap. Her face, framed by freckles and a determined jawline, carried both warmth and wariness. Years in law enforcement had etched patience into her eyes. Patience and the habit of reading danger in silence. At her side trotted Ranger, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat, amber eyes, and the quiet confidence of an animal that had seen fire before. His breath puffed in small clouds, ears twitching as he studied the motionless figure at the bus stop. Maya adjusted her gloves, exhaled into the cold, and called out, "Sir, are you all right? This isn't a safe place to sit. It's below freezing." Ethan didn't move. His head turned slightly, slow and deliberate, like someone surfacing from a deep memory. "I'm fine," he said, voice low, hoarse and measured. "Just waiting." "For what?" Maya asked, her tone still professional, though her hand rested lightly on Ranger's collar. Ethan looked past her, past everything, into the endless white. "For something I lost a long time ago." Maya's instinct prickled. She gave a quiet command. Ranger, stand by. The shepherd tensed, stepping forward, paw sinking into the snow. The man didn't flinch. He simply met the dog's eyes, gray to amber. Something ancient flickered between them, like an old radio signal breaking through static. Ranger froze. His tail lowered. Instead of a growl, a soft, trembling whimper escaped his throat. He took another step, ignoring Maya's sharp command. Then, in a movement that seemed almost reverent, the dog pressed his head against Ethan's chest. Ethan's gloved hand rose hesitantly, fingers shaking, not from cold, but recognition. "Ranger," he whispered, disbelief softening his voice for the first time in years. "Is that really you?" Maya stared, stunned. She had seen K9s obey, protect, attack, but never weep. The shepherd stayed still, eyes half closed, his body trembling against the man's coat, as if memory itself had a heartbeat. Snow continued to fall around them, silent and endless, as if the whole world had paused to listen to two souls remembering the same winter. Snow hissed softly against the frosted windows of the Red Valley Sheriff's Office, the kind of sound that filled silence rather than broke it. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burning wood and damp wool. A cast-iron stove glowed in the corner, its orange light flickering across the cramped room where Ethan Walker sat on a metal chair, his wrists free but his posture rigid, like a man who couldn't remember how to rest. His coat hung open now, revealing a gray sweatshirt worn thin at the seams, and the faint bruising on his neck suggested the harshness of a life spent waiting for impact. Ethan's eyes, those gray-blue eyes dulled by fatigue, darted from the frost-lined window to the dog lying near his boots. He had stopped asking questions an hour ago. For a soldier used to interrogation rooms, silence was its own form of discipline. Across from him, Officer Maya Collins moved carefully, the steam from her breath mingling with the haze of the stove's warmth. She had taken off her winter hat, revealing the auburn strands clinging to her temples, damp from melted snow. Her uniform jacket was half unzipped, her badge glinting under the dim light. She wasn't angry, just uncertain, a rare thing for someone whose job was to command obedience. Her brown eyes studied the man before her, not as a suspect, but as if trying to read the story written between his scars. On the floor beside her, Ranger lay in a coil of calm vigilance, his thick sable and black coat glistening with melted snowflakes, his amber eyes locked on Ethan. Maya finally broke the silence. "I scanned his chip," she said, her voice low, almost hesitant, as if saying it too loud might shatter something fragile. She held up the small handheld scanner, its green light blinking steadily. "Ranger, serial code R19, U.S. Marine Corps K9 Division, assigned to Captain Ethan Walker. Reported missing in action, Kandahar Province, 2018. Ethan exhaled slowly. The sound carried something between grief and relief. 5 years, he murmured, eyes never leaving the dog. 5 years, and they said you were gone. He crouched slightly, his gloved fingers brushing the shepherd's neck with reverence. Ranger stirred, lifting his head to meet his gaze, and in that moment, the distance of war collapsed into a single breath. Maya hesitated, her fingers tightening on the scanner. "How did you lose him?" she asked softly. Ethan leaned back, staring into the stove's orange glow, as if the flames might play back what words could not. "There was a raid," he said after a long pause. "IED blast tore through our convoy. We were trapped under debris for hours. Ranger was trained to drag the wounded clear, but the roof came down faster than anyone expected. He pushed me clear. I never saw him again. His jaw tensed, the muscle flickering beneath the stubble. I thought I buried him in that sand. His voice cracked on the last word, the first fracture in the armor he'd built around himself. The room grew quieter. Even the wood in the stove seemed to stop its snapping. Maya studied him, the war playing behind his eyes like a film only he could see. "And after that?" she asked. Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, where the faint light of dawn bled through the snow. "After that," he said slowly, "the war didn't end. It just changed shape. Every winter I heard him in my sleep, barking, somewhere I couldn't reach. I thought it was guilt. Turns out it was memory." He looked at Ranger again, a faint smile, painful but real, ghosting across his face. Maybe it was both. Outside, a truck engine rumbled to life, followed by hurried voices. Maya glanced toward the hall as the door opened and Sheriff Don Harris stepped in. Don was in his late 50s, a broad-shouldered man with a mustache as gray as the sky outside, the kind of lawman who carried weariness better than authority. His uniform jacket strained at the buttons, and his breath came out in visible puffs from the cold air he dragged in with him. "We've got a situation," he said, his tone clipped. Head office flagged a name, Captain Ethan Walker. Status, missing. Classified. Federal clearance level red. He gave Ethan a long, assessing look. "Which means you're not just some lost Marine, son. You're a ghost that wasn't supposed to come home." Maya frowned. "He hasn't done anything wrong." "Doesn't matter," Don replied, rubbing his gloved hands together. "The feds are on their way. Said they've been tracking a man matching his description for weeks. They want him held until arrival." Ethan didn't move. He just sat back in the chair, his hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes locked on the slow dance of snow outside. There was no panic, no argument, just resignation. "They never like when ghosts start talking," he said quietly. "They remind people the war doesn't stay overseas." Maya looked between him and Ranger, feeling something shift inside her. The obedience drilled into her as an officer wavered under the weight of something simpler. Empathy. She could see it now. The soldier who'd given everything, and the dog who'd given more. Both broken, both surviving by instinct alone. As the sheriff left to make another call, Maya sat on the bench opposite Ethan. Ranger lifted his head, tail brushing once against the wooden floor. The fire popped softly in the stove. Outside, snow kept falling, as if the whole world was trying to bury the noise of men and their mistakes. Ethan finally spoke again, voice low but steady. "You ever feel like you came home but part of you never did?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "More often than I'd admit." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Then maybe you'll understand this. I didn't find him. He found me." His hand brushed against Ranger's fur again, trembling slightly. "And I think he's trying to tell me something." Thumbs. Dog leaned closer, resting his head on Ethan's boot. In the glow of the fire, the past and present seemed to blur. Two soldiers reunited not by command, but by fate. The storm had eased by morning, but the world of Red Valley was still buried beneath a thick hush of white. The streets were lined with snowdrifts so high they swallowed fences and mailboxes, and the air carried that sharp metallic scent that always came after a long night of cold. The diner's windows were fogged, the word "open" flickering weakly in neon red. Inside, the hum of a coffee machine tried and failed to drown out the whispers of what had happened the day before. The soldier, the dog, the impossible reunion. At one of the corner tables sat Noah Thompson, a boy of 10 with a mop of chestnut hair that refused to stay combed and eyes the color of slate after rain. His nose was slightly red from the cold, and his mittens, too big for his hands, dangled from his coat sleeves like tiny flags of defiance. Noah was small for his age but carried himself with the quiet determination of a child who had learned early to observe more than he spoke. His mother, Jenny Thompson, moved between tables with the graceful exhaustion of a woman who worked too much and slept too little. She was in her early 30s, with light brown hair tied in a bun, a soft, round face, and the faint shadows under her eyes of someone who had been raising a son alone since her husband died in a construction accident 2 winters ago. She smiled for customers, but not for herself. Noah's small tablet glowed on the table before him, playing and replaying the same shaky video. A German shepherd pressing his head into a stranger's chest under the falling snow. The camera wobbled as the boy filming whispered, "He remembers him. He really remembers him." The clip ended there, frozen on the image of the man's hand trembling against the dog's fur. Noah watched it again, this time slower, his heart thumping in a rhythm he couldn't name. He had filmed it. He hadn't meant to become part of something bigger. He just saw something beautiful and wanted proof that it was real. Now, the video had thousands of views, and the comments scrolled faster than he could read. Faith restored. Cried watching this. The winter guardians are real. Noah didn't know what to do with that kind of attention. Fame was loud, and he was used to silence. From the counter, Maya Collins stood in uniform, her gloved hands wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee. Her auburn hair, now dry and loose from its braid, brushed against her collar. She hadn't slept much. The image of Ethan Walker and Ranger had followed her through the night like an echo she couldn't silence. She had seen soldiers before, broken, bitter, lost. But something in Ethan was different. His silence wasn't born of arrogance or trauma alone. It was the kind of quiet that comes from carrying something sacred, something too fragile for words. Maya glanced at Noah, then at the tablet on the table, and recognized the video immediately. "You filmed that?" she asked gently, approaching him. Noah nodded, eyes wide, his breath fogging the screen. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to get anyone in trouble. I just thought people should see." His voice trembled slightly, as if he wasn't sure if he'd done something good or terrible. Maya crouched beside him, lowering her voice. "You did something brave, Noah. You showed people what loyalty looks like. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses." She hesitated, then added with a faint smile, "Just maybe next time, tell your mom before you make half the country cry, all right?" Jenny overheard, chuckling softly from the counter. "He's got his father's timing," she said, her voice warm but laced with that quiet ache of memory. "Always showing up in the middle of chaos." Maya's smile faded slightly. "Your husband?" Jenny nodded, wiping her hands on a towel. "He died building the new bridge by the river. They said the storm made the beams too slick. Noah was 7. Her eyes softened as she looked at her son. "He doesn't talk much about it, but sometimes I catch him whispering to the dog statues out front like they can hear him. I guess kids find their own prayers." Before Maya could respond, the bell above the diner door jingled. Ethan Walker entered, snow still clinging to his coat, and Ranger followed close behind, his fur glistening like frost under the morning light. Conversations fell silent. Even the jukebox seemed to hum lower. Ethan looked out of place in the small diner, too tall, too still, the kind of man who carried gravity with him wherever he went. His jaw was set, his eyes distant yet alert, scanning the room the way soldiers did when they had learned that peace was never permanent. Noah froze. The man from his video stood right there, flesh and breath and burden. Ranger noticed him first, tail wagging once before he patted over and pressed his nose against the boy's knee. The simple gesture made Noah laugh out loud, the sound pure and unexpected in the quiet morning. Ethan's expression softened, the lines around his eyes easing. "You filmed us," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Noah nodded, cheeks pink. "Yes, sir, I just thought people should see something good for once." Ethan's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "They did," he murmured, "and maybe they needed it." His gaze drifted toward the frosted window, where the reflection of Ranger's shape flickered in the light. "Sometimes it takes a stranger to remind the world what we forgot." Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and soft, blurring the line between heaven and earth. Maya watched Ethan as he reached down to ruffle Ranger's fur, her heart tightening with a feeling she couldn't name. Admiration, sorrow, maybe both. In that dim light, she saw what few others could. Not a broken soldier, but a man standing at the edge of redemption, his past wrapped around him like a frost-bitten shadow. And the dog, steadfast, watchful, was the only one who knew the way back. The morning came gray and heavy, the kind that made the world feel half buried in silence. The wind pushed through Red Valley's narrow streets, scattering fine snow that shimmered like crushed glass under the pale light. The town, usually still at dawn, was restless now. Trucks idled outside the sheriff's office, breath of their engines rising like ghosts into the frozen air. Word had spread. Federal agents were coming to take Ethan Walker and his dog. Ethan stood by the edge of the road, his breath visible in short bursts, his posture calm but resolute. His old Marine coat was buttoned to the throat, snow crusting the shoulders, and a faint shadow of sleeplessness hung beneath his eyes. The night had not been kind to him. It rarely was. War had trained him to survive without rest, but not without ghosts. He looked down at Ranger, who sat close beside him, the German shepherd's fur dusted with frost. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, alert but trusting, amber eyes steady on the man who had once been his captain. In the distance, a black SUV emerged through the fog of snow, followed by two more vehicles bearing government plates. From the first stepped Agent Cole Matthews, a man in his early 40s with the unyielding face of someone accustomed to giving orders and not waiting for answers. His black overcoat was immaculate, his gloves pressed tight against his wrists, and his short blonde hair was cut in severe military fashion. Yet behind the sharpness of his features, there was fatigue, the kind earned by carrying out too many orders he no longer believed in. "Captain Ethan Walker," he called out, his voice slicing through the cold. "By federal directive, you're to be transported to Fort Pine for questioning. The animal," he glanced at Ranger, "will be retrieved for reassignment." The word hung in the air like a curse. Reassignment. To them, Ranger was still property, a number stamped into a record, a tool to be redeployed. Ethan said nothing. His eyes, pale as the snow beneath them, flicked toward the crowd gathering behind the barricade. The people of Red Valley had come, faces red from the cold, breath fogging in unison. Among them stood Maya Collins, still in her uniform, though her badge gleamed less like authority and more like defiance now. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath her beanie, but a few loose strands danced in the wind. She had not been ordered here. She came because her conscience did. Beside her, bundled in a thick wool coat, was Noah Thompson, clutching his mother's hand, his small fingers trembling, but not from cold. The video he had filmed had turned their quiet town into a symbol overnight, but now, seeing Ethan surrounded by agents, the boy's pride curdled into fear. From the far side of the street, the crowd parted for an old man making his way forward through the snow. Harlan Pierce, 73, a retired Army sergeant who had lived in Red Valley since before most of the town, was born. His spine was bent but unbroken, his shoulders still broad beneath the thick brown coat he'd worn since the Korean winters. His face was a map of scars and memory, one eye clouded, the other sharp as flint. Each step came with the soft crunch of his cane, carved from oak, steady as his resolve. When he reached the front, he planted the cane into the ice and lifted his chin. "If the government's calling loyalty a possession," he said, his voice thin but ringing clear, "then this country's forgotten what sacrifice means." The agents exchanged uneasy looks. Cole Matthews' jaw clenched. "Sir, this isn't your concern." Harlan's lips twisted into a faint smile. "I buried friends who'd say otherwise." He tapped the cane once. "That dog isn't yours to claim. He already gave his life once." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow. The townspeople murmured, their breath forming small halos in the cold. Maya stepped forward then, unable to stay silent. Her boots crunched through the snow until she reached Ethan's side. She looked up at him, tall, broad-shouldered, stoic, and saw the faint tremor in his jaw as he fought to stay composed. She placed a gloved hand on his arm. "You're not a criminal, Ethan," she said firmly. "You're a man trying to find your way home." Something shifted. The agents hesitated. Cole Matthews's gaze flickered from Maya to Ranger, who stood poised, unmoving, head slightly tilted, as if understanding every word. "Orders are orders," Cole began, but his voice lacked conviction now. He looked at Ethan, at the quiet dignity in his stance, the soldier's restraint that spoke louder than argument. Ethan knelt slowly, one knee sinking into the snow, and wrapped his arms around Ranger. The German shepherd leaned into him, pressing close, tail unmoving, but body still, like a soldier standing at final watch. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to fade. What they saw wasn't rebellion. It was devotion. A man and a creature who had walked through fire together and somehow found each other again in the frost. Harlan stepped forward once more, voice trembling but fierce. "If you take that dog," he said, "you'll have to walk through all of us." The crowd murmured in agreement, boots shuffling forward, faces defiant. Agent Cole stood frozen for a long moment. Then he exhaled, the white vapor curling upward like surrender. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. "We're done here." He turned, motioned his men back toward the vehicles. The engines roared to life again, retreating into the white veil of snow, leaving behind only the silence of wind and breath. Ethan stayed kneeling, forehead pressed briefly to Ranger's fur. Maya stood beside him, eyes wet but smiling. Harlan's cane tapped once against the frozen ground, like a benediction. In the distance, the snow began to fall heavier again, but this time it didn't feel like winter's cruelty. It felt like grace. The sky over Red Valley was painted in bruised shades of crimson and gold, the kind of sunset that burned quietly before surrendering to snow. The cold was sharp, but gentle too, wrapping the town in a silence that felt like reverence. Beneath the lamplight at the edge of the square stood Ethan Walker and his German shepherd, Ranger. The two figures were framed against the fading horizon, man and dog, soldier and soul, still, solemn, yet at peace. The place looked almost sacred now, the old bench where they had first met again after years apart, cleared of snow by the townspeople who had gathered throughout the day. Ethan looked older than his 38 years, though not in body so much as in the way he carried time inside him. His once proud shoulders now sloped with quiet acceptance. His beard had grown rougher, streaked with frost and gray, and his hands, scarred from battles long buried, trembled slightly as he reached down to brush the snow from Ranger's back. There was a gentleness in the movement, the kind reserved for things one has lost and somehow found again. For years he had wandered through deserts of noise and memory, searching for something to believe in. Tonight, under the bleeding sky of winter's end, he finally stood still enough to realize he had been found instead. The square was filled with small acts of warmth. Noah Thompson, the boy who had filmed their reunion, crouched near the bench, tracing something in the snow with his mitten. His breath came out in puffs as he looked up at Ethan with awe, the kind only a child's heart could carry unshaken. Beside him, his mother Jenny held a folded wooden plaque in both hands, the letters carved carefully into its grain by the townsfolk. For those who walked through the storm and still returned, together. Jenny, a woman in her early 30s with the tired beauty of someone who had weathered both grief and grace, offered the plaque to Ethan with a faint, trembling smile. "The men from the mill built it this morning," she said. "They said it belongs here, where he found you." Ethan took it slowly, fingers brushing the carved words, unable to speak for a moment. Maya Collins stepped closer, her breath forming white ribbons in the air. The soft fur collar of her parka brushed her chin as she knelt and set something before Ranger, a worn, knitted scarf, pale blue, edges frayed. "For him," she said quietly, voice warm against the cold. "To keep him warm." She smiled faintly, but her eyes shimmered with something unspoken. Admiration, affection, maybe a kind of grief. She had seen soldiers come and go, most leaving behind only their shadows. But these two, this man and his dog, had turned loss into something almost holy. Ranger sniffed the scarf curiously, then sat down, tail brushing against the snow. His amber eyes lifted to Ethan's face, waiting, always waiting. Ethan chuckled softly, his voice rough from cold and emotion. "Still guarding me, huh?" He placed a hand on the dog's head. "Some habits don't die easy." The shepherd leaned closer, pressing into the warmth of that touch. Behind them, Harlan Pierce, the old veteran who had defended Ethan before the agents, stood wrapped in his wool coat, the carved oak cane planted in the snow. His one good eye gleamed beneath the brim of his cap. "That dog's earned more medals than I ever did," he said, voice gravelly yet full of quiet pride. "You both have." The others laughed softly, their breath visible in the chill air. The moment didn't need ceremony. It was ceremony enough just to stand there. Noah, his cheeks flushed red from the cold, tugged gently at Ethan's sleeve. "Mr. Walker," he asked in that small, hopeful voice only children carry, "did God bring him back to you?" The question hung between them like a fragile snowflake, too pure to fall. Ethan knelt down to meet the boy's eyes, his expression softening. "Not just God," he said finally, his voice low but certain. "Sometimes the heart remembers what heaven forgets. That's what brought him back." The words seemed to linger, carried by the slow drift of snow. The wind had softened now, no longer cruel, just whispering. Ethan rose, his hand still resting on Ranger's back. Together they looked toward the hills beyond Red Valley, where mist rolled like silver veils over the trees. For the first time in years, Ethan's face was unguarded. There was peace there, fragile, earned, complete. As the townspeople began to leave, one by one, Maya stayed behind, watching as Ethan and Ranger started walking down the frozen road. Their silhouettes stretched long and golden against the last light of the sun. The snowflakes fell heavier now, catching in the fading glow, turning the world into a haze of light and memory. Ethan didn't look back. Ranger walked beside him, step for step, tail low but steady, a silent promise written in motion. The sky dimmed to twilight. The two figures grew smaller in the distance until they were swallowed by the snow, a man and his dog disappearing into the white, like a prayer whispered back to heaven. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, in the shape of a loyal friend, a stranger's kindness, or the warmth that survives even the coldest winters. Ethan and Ranger's story isn't just about reunion. It's about redemption, about how God finds ways to remind us that no one is ever truly lost. Even in the darkest storms, His hand guides the broken home again. If you've ever loved deeply, lost something precious, or waited for a sign that faith still lives in this world, this story is your reminder. Miracles still happen. They may not look like what we expect, but they are there, in loyalty, in forgiveness, and in every act of love that refuses to die. May God bless everyone watching this story. May He keep you warm in the winters of your own life, and remind you, you are never walking alone. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe for more stories of faith and second chances, and let's keep spreading God's light, one story, one soul at a time.